we, in our community and our families, each family group would have their own healers in different areas. Like today we have doctors for the physical. We had what were like psychiatrists or psychologists, counselors for your mind. And so there were different healers. And then we would also have medicine people who would prescribe and then go and gather the ingredients for the medicines, whatever medicines it was that you needed. So some people had one individual for each, like some would specialize in one particular area. For example, my grandma, who was one of my teachers, taught me the herbal medicines, talking about our traditional ways of healing. And she would wake me up before the sun came up and say, come on, let's go. And I'd be all bleary-eyed and trying hard to wake up because Grandma was taking me out for some education. And I didn't think of it that way. I thought of it as being able to spend alone time with my grandma. And anytime you were with elders, there was always teaching going on. Always, usually in the form of a story, so that you had to figure out what they were talking about and what the moral of the story was. And so we would grab our baskets and our little tools that we needed to harvest the plants, because some she would pinch off with her fingers and some she would use a knife to dig the roots. But she would say, this plant, don't pick with a knife. Use your fingernail to pinch it off, because we don't want to add the energy of the knife to this medicine. And so she would teach me that this particular plant, we only harvest as soon as the sun comes up, before the dew evaporates. We must be here to pick it just as soon as the sun comes up. So as soon as the sun hit the horizon and started to climb, then she would let me help her pick. And she would guide my hands and say, no, put your hand this way. And then very specific about her teaching so that I would do it the right way. And then we would take our time, and sometimes she'd bring a thermos of tea and some snacks for us to have, and we'd sit and have a little picnic in the forest while we waited for the dew to leave the ground, and then we'd pick other plants. So to me, this wasn't just about learning how and when to gather the herbal remedies, I guess they're called now. But it was about being out in nature, that feeling of peace and contentment. And my great-grandfather, who was also one of my biggest teachers, always said that God's house is everywhere. You don't have to come to church, because I would sit beside him in church. You don't have to come to church to be with God or to speak to God. Every time you go out with your grandma, you're going out to be with God. That's why you feel such peace in your heart. That's why when you're sitting there with your grandma and you're looking around and you guys don't need to talk, because you're visiting with Great Spirit. And to me, that's that same feeling that I get when I'm in the forest, when I'm in the woods. That same connection, reminder of my connection to God, Great Spirit, Creator, whatever name you want to put, because we had our own name for God. it always felt like when I would go to the big churches, to the big cathedrals with my grandpa, it had that same feeling of peace and love and calm, beautiful, just when you walk through the door. You can't escape it. You can't hide from it. It just makes you feel so peaceful and contented. You have no wants or needs or desires for anything, just to be there and just to sit and enjoy that feeling of peace and contentment. And I think it's so much more important today because I watch people as they rush around so fast and always have a list a mile long of the things they need to get done for the day at work, and then rush to get groceries, and then rush to get home to make dinner. There's no time in between throughout their day to find that peace and contentment, to find that connection to source. And so the people that I work with, I'm always telling them, slow down, calm down. When you leave work, release work at work. It'll still be there tomorrow. You can let it go for now and go home and rest, rejuvenate. So you can come back tomorrow refreshed, and all the things you were worrying about, they'll still be there. So you can pick it up the next day or leave it. Because often what we fuss and worry about, and we go and get it the next day, we go, why was I worrying about that? Look at how great this person is doing today. Maybe they struggled yesterday, but being with you, having someone to listen, gave them the peace, a little bit of peace that they needed to make it through the day and come back the next day feeling a little bit better. And like working in the downtown east side, it's so easy for people to be dismissive of the homeless ones who live on the streets, who are there every day. And I watch people as they walk by them and they look straight ahead and or turn away. And I had this really great experience. I was going home on the bus and I had worked 2 jobs that day. And I was so tired. And I just said, please, Great Spirit, I just want to go home. I'm so tired. And I had given a lot from my heart that day. And so we pulled into this one stop by where the old Woodward's building is. And there was a lineup of people, as there often is there. And this movement out of the corner of my eye made me look, and there was a man at the end of the line, young man, and his arms were flailing, and he was like on something, obviously, either high or coming down from a high. And the people in front of him kept trying to pull away and look behind them and pull away even more. And so the people got on the bus, and then I fully expected the driver to close the door on him because I've seen them do that on occasion. And he didn't. And he just looked and he said, "Take a seat, please." And this guy was, as soon as he got on, he started yelling, angry, very angry. And it was scaring the people on the bus. And I looked at him and I could hear, love him. And I went, oh. So he was gesturing to punch people and screaming in their face as he was walking down the aisle in the bus towards me. And he looked at me and he went, and turned away quick. And he went across the aisle to a bench behind me. And there was a couple sitting there, and he got right in their face and was yelling and screaming and calling them names and just being very aggressive, and was like inches from his face. And I remembered, love him. So I imagined myself filling up with love from Great Spirit, from God, Creator. And I flooded myself and filled my heart and overflowed from my heart. And I poured it into this young man. And I just kept pouring it. And as soon as it touched his heart, he spun around, and I thought for sure he hurt himself because I heard his neck crack. He turned his head so fast. And I just kept pouring it, filling him with love. And he looked at me and he came over to me, and the guy that he was yelling at stood up ready to defend me. And the young man came and he fell at my knees. So I turned in my seat to put my body facing him. And he hugged my knees and he cried and he cried and he cried. Auntie, Auntie, you see me? I said, yes, I see you, my love. And I just kept talking to him gently and softly and with love, as grandmas and mums will often do. And he kept crying, and I could feel the wetness on my slacks soaking through to my knees. And I thought, it doesn't matter. And I just kept stroking the back of his head, telling him I loved him. I see you, my boy. I see you, my son. I love you. I love you. I'm here. I won't let you go. And just kept talking softly, gently, like we do with little kids when they hurt themselves. And after a few minutes of this, I realized the bus had stopped in the middle of the road. So we're blocking the street. And people are honking and like, what are you doing, crazy bus driver? And the bus driver was watching us. So he wasn't driving anywhere, watching this whole scene play out. This man going from furious and anger and just aggressive and mean and instantly to gentle. He was sad and he cried and he kept telling me, I love you, Auntie. I'm so glad you're here. And I kept saying, I see you. I love you. I'm here. I'm here. And a few minutes of this goes by, must have been at least 5 minutes. And then he sat back on his heels and he wiped his eyes, wiped his hands on his sleeve, his nose. And he said, you do see me. I said, yes, I do. And you do love me. I said, oh, yes, I love you with all my heart. And he nodded and he said, I love you, Auntie. I said, I love you too, my boy. And he stood up and he looked around. And then he said, Auntie, I'm never going to touch drugs again. Never. Thank you. And he got up straight, like he had never been high, like he wasn't, like they say in the downtown in the clinic sometimes, tweaking out on withdrawal or whatever. He got off the bus and he waved and walked away. And I never saw him again because the pandemic hit. And I often think of him and wonder, did he really stop taking drugs? But at that very moment, I believe that Great Spirit spoke to me and said, love him. Because we look at the homeless people in the downtown east side. Most people look at them and don't see them. Ignore them, growl about them, swear at them. And they forget that there are people in those people's lives who love them, who care about them, who think about them all the time, who will every week go and look for them because they love them. And then they have families who cut them out of their lives because they don't know what to do with them. They don't know how to deal with addiction. And that day was a very valuable lesson to me that everybody needs love. To me, that's bigger than spirituality. It's bigger than religion. Love is, to me, from God, from Great Spirit, Creator, universe, whatever name you want to put on. My mom was, and my grandma were very Catholic, very devout, very firm in their beliefs. I had to go to catechism every Sunday with my brothers and sisters. I hated it. Not because it was in God's house, as my grandpa used to say, but because they made Great Spirit to be cruel and judgmental and bitter and almost ashamed of us. And they would say, even babies are sinners. And I would get so angry and say, how can you look at a newborn and say that child is a sinner when they haven't even had a chance to go out into the world and do something bad? I don't believe that. I don't believe that God would condemn us so. And because I was still young enough, I could still see, all little kids can see God, Great Spirit, Creator, until they go to school. And then they get taught, no, you can't. You can't see him. No, you don't talk to him. Looking at those children as if they're sinners and bad because they're little kids. When God revels in the joy of us as being children, his children. And so my mom would get angry at me when I get kicked out of catechism, and I'd be sitting on the front porch waiting for my brothers and sisters to come out. And she'd say, can't you just accept? And I said, no. They're trying to tell me that God is mean and vengeful and hurtful and judges us. That's not the God that I know. And she would get really upset with me and send me to my room until I could think about it. And it was through those times I thought, why do we have religion if all we do is make God out to be horrible? When my experience with the Creator, with Great Spirit, is one of love. So finally, when I was about maybe 11, she said, okay, you don't have to go to catechism anymore. Because the nuns and the priests would phone her and say, can't you take care of her? Can't you get her to believe? And she said, but she does believe. And to which I would say, I don't believe in God. I know God. Because my great grandpa taught me God's house is everywhere. God is everywhere. That was where I found my peace, not in church. My mom and my grandma, that was where they found their peace, their contentment with the world. And I thought, that's okay. But for me, it wasn't enough. To me, I needed to know that our God, our Creator, our Great Spirit, was a loving and kind and generous one. The way my great grandpa always talked about him. Not the vengeful, bitter, mean-spirited, judgmental one. And I would say to the nuns and the priest, if he loves us, why is he so mean? Why is he judgmental? And they'd go, oh, can't you just believe? And I'd say, but I know God. So then when my mom said I didn't have to go to catechism anymore, I said, does that mean I don't have to go to church? And she was like, well, I'll leave it up to you. So I did still keep going to church because I did find peace there. I didn't know that's what it was. But as I look back, I realized that is what it was. That same feeling that I got when I went with my grandma out before dawn into the forest to gather medicines. It comforted me, lifted me up to know the cruelty in the world belonged to the people who created the cruelty. And that our God, our Great Spirit, our Creator was there loving me. And when I messed up and did dumb things, as kids often do, we still had him there loving us, smiling at us, lifting us up. That's what brought me comfort. That's what brings me comfort today, is knowing that God, Creator, Great Spirit is still there, loving us, watching us, finding joy in the little things that we do, helping us to remember to be compassionate, to be filled with that love that I gave that young man that day, because that's what we all need. And the more that we can do that, the better a world we will create in his name. And people get angry about the pandemic, and they get angry about all the forest fires and the flooding and to which I say, help Mother Earth by sending her prayers of love and healing, because that's what we need. All the ones who run around angry and walk in shadow all the time, they need that love too. And the more love that we can give, some of that love goes into our Mother Earth. She grows the food for us to eat. She grows the medicines that we need, that we can harvest. But we need to show her love so that all these crazy fires will stop, so that the huge winds that they create will stop, so that the pandemic will stop, so that that fear will stop. I watched a show yesterday, and they said Just be ready because there will be another pandemic. And I went, putting fear out there, making people more afraid, instead of saying, these are the things that you can do to protect yourself and your loved ones. These are the things that you can do to be careful. Instead of saying, get ready, there's another one coming. The more we focus on what we don't want, the more we get of what we don't want. I had a friend who was so afraid of getting COVID, so afraid, carried around bottles of hand sanitizer and packages of masks and had a hat and eye shield. Well, guess what? He got COVID. Sickest he's ever been, ever. He said, see, I told you I was going to get COVID. So do we bring that kind of thing because we lose our faith? We lose our belief? Or do we get it because we are being fearful, full of fear? I've seen different programs from different doctors on TV talking about who gets COVID and who doesn't. And I thought, I think it's the fear. If you fear something, it's going to happen. We manifest. God, Creator, Great Spirit, lets us choose. He will protect us if we ask, but He also allows us to choose for ourselves because He loves us. I think if we remember in the Bible, it says that we are children of God. And if we are children of God, would He not love His children? I love the heck out of my kids and my nieces and nephews and my grandnieces and grandnephews and my grandkids because they're treasures. They are gifts from God to show us to keep your joy and that wide-eyed wonder of the world that He has created for us, instead of taking it for granted and rushing to work and rushing through the day and then rushing home, and then we don't even see it. We don't see it anymore, and we wonder why we get sad and why we get sick. And it's like, take your shoes and socks off and stand on the grass. Feel the love that the Mother Earth is giving to us. Feel the love that comes from God, Creator, Great Spirit, comes through us into Mother Earth. It's like a big circle. We make the disconnect. We are the ones who disconnect Great Spirit from Earth, Great Spirit from us. We're the ones that do that because He will never abandon us ever. We make the disconnect and lose our faith, lose our belief, lose our knowing of who Great Spirit, God, Creator is. Because we know if we are His children, and I believe we are, how can we deny knowing. It would be like me denying my parents, my grandparents, my great-grandparents, my great-great-grandparents, etc. Can't do that. And some people say to me, I have this beautiful cross that I bought for myself. And I was wearing it at a wellness day at the Friendship Center. And this man came up to me angry. How dare you? He said to me. And I said, how dare I what? How dare you wear that cross? All the things that damn church did to us. How can you do that? And I held it up and I said, this is not the church. This cross is not the church. This is my representation in my mind and in my heart of who Great Spirit is. This is the reminder to me that he sent his son and did the suffering for us because he loves us. This to me is love. This is not the church. This is that love. No matter what we do, no matter what we say, no matter the dumb things we do, no matter the evil things we do or the really bad things, he still loves us. That's what that cross meant to me. And I told him that. And as I talked, I could see the anger kind of leaching out of him. And I said, and the nuns and the priests that hurt you, they are not the church. They are not the church. They used that as an excuse. Don't buy into that. God still loves you. Remember the God that you were taught by your elders before you were taken. Before you were taken and kidnapped and put in residential school. And he sat for a minute and he goes, I remember. And he had these flashes, he said, of himself playing in the creek behind his house and running around barefoot with his friends on the reserve at home. And how beautiful that felt and how joyful it felt. And I said, that is God. That is who this cross means to me, not the church. And I said, there are many Indigenous people who go to church, even though they went to residential school. And it brings them peace because they feel God, they feel Great Spirit when they go to church. And that's okay. Good for them, I say. But I cling to the knowledge that he is everywhere. Everywhere. The whole world is his love, is him. We are his children. That means we are part of him. We cannot separate essential self. So let that be the comfort that lifts you up when you feel down and you're tired of hearing about the pandemic and you're tired of hearing about the forest fires. Call in the love. Bring in that love and that peace will follow. That joy that I feel simply for being here. I am honored to be his child, to be able to speak of his love for all of us. Because the nuns would say, if you don't listen to your parents, you're bad, you're evil. God will get mad at you for that. And I said, no, he won't. Because he loves me. So my mom and my grandma and other relatives found great peace in going to church. I found great peace in knowing that God, Great Spirit, Creator, is everywhere. To me, that's church for me, personally, for me. So when I sit in meditation and I think about God, I think about my great-grandfather too, because he is the one who kept reminding me he is everywhere and he loves you. He loves you. And then he'd kind of laugh and he'd go, that doesn't mean you get to be bad and run around and do terrible things. I'd laugh. Okay, Grandpa, I'd say. But to know, to have that relationship with Great Spirit brings me peace and contentment always. So when I go to work in the downtown east side, or I'm on one of these committees that I am, or the boards, or whatever I'm doing, I remember I'm here to do his work, to share the love that he gives me, to pass that love on to everybody. Everybody I see, everybody I meet, and people say, oh, it always feels so good to be with you. It always feels nice to hear you talk. I love it when you talk. Well, it isn't really me. It's him using my body and my voice and my energy to share his love with the world, to share his love with everybody, and to remind us all we're not alone. We are never alone because he is there. He is with us, loving us, holding us when we get sad and heartbroken, loving us when we fall, loving us when we're in addiction, no matter what the addiction is. That day, that young boy on the bus, that young man, he gave that man love through me. He gave that love. I was the conduit to pass that love and to remind me that's what everybody needs and wants and is always looking for, that love. I'm lucky. I know I have it. I'm lucky that I meet other people in my life who know they have it. That same beautiful love. Not because we do great things, not because we accomplish all kinds of things, just because I'm me, just because you're you. He loves us. So thank you for listening. I hope this helps. This is, to me, the way that I was raised by my great grandpa and everybody else, parents and grandaunties and uncles, was to always remind me that everything I do must come from a place of love and light. That when I do healing work, or when I'm on a committee or an advisory board or research project or whatever I'm doing, to always come from love, to make sure that I am bringing his love to this world, to show everybody it is their divine right to know that love, to remember that love. So thank you, everybody.